Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Wasserman. I welcome you all to the third edition of Peace is Possible. In this program, we will give voice to those who are advocating for peace around the world and for a foreign policy that puts peace first. Many of these voices are not being heard in the mainstream media. Peace is possible if the American people stand up as one and call for it. In order to make peace possible, we need to make sure our voices are heard in Congress. Congress, in turn, needs to exercise its constitutional power to make decisions on issues of war and peace. This power has been undermined by the executive use of military power with little, if any, congressional authority. It is therefore urgent that Congress hear from the people on the need for the Congress to stand up for peace and exercise its constitutional power on issues of peace and war. I urge you to place calls to the offices of our two senators, Senators Blumenthal and Murphy, and the congressperson from our district, John Larson, in support of the resolutions I will be presenting in this program. Please ask them to sign on to these resolutions as co-sponsors if they have not already. In most cases, they have not, with the exception of Chris Murphy. Please have a pen and paper ready to write down the names of the resolutions and contact information. You can reach the Congressional Switchboard at 202-224-3121. And they will connect you to our senators and congresspeople. Again, the number is 202-224-3121. I will repeat this number at a later point in this program. When you reach the offices, you will speak to an aide. Please state your name and address and let them know which resolutions you are supporting or opposing. Ask the congressperson or senator to co-sponsor. Ask for a response in writing. Be friendly. The resolution numbers I will give will change with the new Congress that begins in January. But you can use the numbers that I will be giving if you call this month before this session is officially over. If you call in January, state the name of the resolution until it can get a new number. 1. Urge Congressperson John Larson to give full support to the efforts of Congressperson Barbara Lee to sunset the 2001 Authorization for Military Force. This authorization was passed in response to 9/11 and continues to be used as a legal basis for the executive branch to use military force without congressional approval. If you call before the end of the session this month, ask him to sign on to H.R. 1229. That's H.R. 1229. 2. We need to oppose dangerous military involvement in Syria, which could lead to a U.S.-Russia confrontation. Senator Murphy has correctly pointed out that U.S. military involvement in Syria is helping to prolong the conflict. There needs to be a diplomatic solution to this horrible war, not an escalation of this conflict. Allegations of the use of chemical warfare need to be investigated by an international body, not used as an excuse to bomb people. Congressperson Lee is also sponsoring a resolution to prevent further U.S. military deployment in Syria, H.R. 1473. That's H.R. 1473 if you call this month. Please call to support this. Use the number H.R. 1473 if you call this month before the end of the session, or you could say Representative Barbara Lee's resolution to oppose dangerous military involvement in Syria. 3. Resolution to require an act of Congress prior to any first use of nuclear weapons. This is intended to keep the first strike use of nuclear weapons out of the hands of Donald Trump or any other future president or general who may be tempted to use nuclear weapons on a first strike basis. Chris Murphy has signed on to the Senate version, and John Larson has signed on to the House version of this resolution. They should be thanked, and Senator Blumenthal should be asked to sign on as well. If you call before the end of the session this month, ask Senator Blumenthal to sign on to S-200. H.R. 4415 should also be supported as well, which would create a no first strike policy in regard to nuclear weapons. In other words, it would say that we would never be the first to use nuclear weapons. Such a no first strike policy regarding nuclear weapons would make the world a much safer place in case war breaks out between nations with nuclear weapons. 4. Resolution to oppose an unconstitutional war against Iran. Senator Murphy has signed on as a co-sponsor. Iran is being targeted by the Trump administration, despite the fact that the International Atomic Energy Agency has stated that Iran has been in full compliance with the nuclear agreement. If you call before the end of this session this month, ask Senator Blumenthal to sign on as a co-sponsor to S-3517. That's S-3517 for this month, or the resolution to prevent an unconstitutional war with Iran. You could say that as well. 5. Please call in support of the Hold the Line resolution to cut funding for new forms of nuclear weapons. The development of new forms of nuclear weapons, sometimes called the modernization of nuclear weapons, endangers us all and by and large is being left out of the public discussion. Many of these weapons may be considered usable by future military generals or presidents. Many of these weapons being developed could go undetected by radar, thus increasing the temptation they would be used. All of this leads us down the road of an expensive and dangerous arms race with Russia and China. The world has come too close to nuclear war too many times. We need agreements to limit and reduce nuclear weapons, and we need to cut the funding for dangerous nuclear weapon development, called nuclear weapon, quote, modernization, unquote. Many fear the breaking of the INF treaty with the Russians will open the door to the creation of new forms of nuclear weapons, new dangerous forms of nuclear weapons. If you call before the end of this session this month, please ask our senators and congresspeople to support H.R. 6840 and S-3448, or the Hold the Line resolution. Please ask Senator Blumenthal to reconsider his support for nuclear weapon modernization and to support the Hold the Line resolution. Please call in support of the INF Treaty, the START Treaty, and other treaties to reduce the nuclear weapon danger. 6. The War Powers Act would cut military aid to the Saudis and United Arab Emirates that is connected to the war on the people of Yemen. These nations have been conducting a brutal war against the people of Yemen. This is a war that has resulted in the denial of food and medicine to the people of Yemen and attacks on civilians. Our military support for the Saudis and United Arab Emirates is involving the U.S. in this war. The War Powers Act tries to rein in unchecked executive power, which has brought us into dangerous wars and has brought us into this very brutal war against the people of Yemen. Senator Murphy has been a leader in support of the War Powers Act and is a co-sponsor of the War Powers Act. Senator Blumenthal has signed on as well. A week ago, the War Powers Act resolution passed the Senate. Please call Congressman John Larson to ask him to co-sponsor the War Powers Act in the House of Representatives. If you call before the end of the session this month, please ask him to co-sponsor House Congressional Resolution 138. 7. Please ask John Larson to co-sponsor the Berta Cáceres Human Rights Resolution to cut military aid to the military of Honduras. Berta Cáceres was assassinated while defending indigenous lands against development. This assassination appears to be part of a pattern of assassinations of environmental and indigenous leaders in Honduras. In fact, an Honduran criminal court has just found an active military officer involved with this assassination. This makes it all the more imperative that military aid to the Honduras military should be cut until these cases are resolved. If you call John Larson's office, please, before the end of the session this month, please ask him to co-sponsor H.R. 1299 and follow the example of Congressperson Rosa DeLauro, who has co-sponsored this resolution. That's H.R. 1299 if you call this month. 8. The Corker-Kane authorization for military force should be opposed. It puts the onus on Congress to reject new wars by a 2/3 margin. Please call our senators to oppose the Corker-Kane authorization for military force, which moves us backwards. Congressional power to declare war or stop war funding should be strengthened, not weakened. Please ask our senators to oppose this destructive resolution. 9. Please urge all of our senators and congresspeople to oppose more increases in the military budget and to support peace conversion. More submarines equipped with nuclear weapons will not make us more secure. U.S. wars and military bases around the world are not in the interests of the American people. We can create many more jobs by investing in health care, schools, infrastructure, and renewable energy. Eisenhower pointed out that money going to build and maintain these weapons is taken from the resources we need to feed and house people. I agree with this. Please ask our senators and congresspeople to support the Congressional Progressive Caucus People's Budget, which proposes to rein in Pentagon spending. That's the Congressional Progressive Caucus People's Budget. It is urgent we work for peace and international understanding in an age of nuclear weapons. War is the road to catastrophe. This is made even more dangerous in that nuclear weapons are on hair-trigger alert, which leaves very little time, perhaps minutes, to decide if there is an error in the warning system or an actual attack. Hillary Clinton made reference to this situation in one of her debates with Donald Trump during the 2016 election. Let me repeat, the world has come too close to nuclear war too many times. In 1995, the Russians mistook a weather satellite for an oncoming missile. The so-called nuclear briefcase was opened. There were other close calls. Again, nuclear weapons on hair-trigger alert leaves very little time to decide if we are under attack or if there's a problem with the warning system. This is all the more reason why we need to reduce nuclear weapons and build bridges of international communication rather than build a new generation of nuclear weapons and enter into a dangerous arms race. We need to work together as a species to eliminate the danger of nuclear weapons and to oppose any further development of these most horrible of weapons. The wars the U.S. conducted in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and our military involvement in Libya and Syria did not and do not serve to make the world or our nation more secure. International differences can be resolved without war. I repeat again, international differences can be resolved without war. We do not need to send our brave soldiers all around the world at the expense of critical priorities in our own nation. I believe we can best honor our brave soldiers and veterans by working for peace and preventing war. If all of this makes sense to you, please join the Connecticut Peace and Solidarity Coalition. We have organized 3 statewide peace conferences, hand-delivered hundreds of postcards and letters for peace to our congressional offices, and helped organize the annual Hiroshima observance in Hartford. We will be working to put peace on the agenda in Congress and in our nation. Please consider joining us and participating in our monthly meetings. If you would like more information, please contact me, Joe Wasserman, at 860-561-1897, 860-561-1897, or joewass64@yahoo.com, joewass64@yahoo.com. We happen to be meeting this Saturday at 11:30. Please call me for more information. Again, I will repeat the Congressional Switchboard number, the resolution information, and my contact number. You can reach the Congressional Switchboard at 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121, and they will connect you to our congressperson and either one of our two senators. Let me just review the resolutions, and you don't have to. If you could use the number, or you could simply give the name of the resolution. One is Congressperson Barbara Lee's resolution to sunset the 2001 authorization for military force. It now has the number HR 1229, which will change in January. Representative Barbara Lee's resolution, HR 1473 now, to oppose dangerous military escalation or involvement in Syria. Again, that number will change in January. Resolution to require an act of Congress prior to any first use of nuclear weapons. Resolution to oppose an unconstitutional war against Iran. It's now S3517, will change in January. Please call and support the Hold the Line resolution to cut funding for new forms of nuclear weapons. Please call in support of the War Powers Act, which actually has passed the Senate. It may have to go for a revote in the Senate, but that actually has a possibility of going somewhere at this point, pretty quickly. Call in support of the War Powers Act in regard to stopping military aid to the Saudis and United Arab Emirates to stop U.S. involvement in Yemen. Please ask John Larson to co-sponsor the Berta Caceres Human Rights Resolution, and to oppose, and in the Senate, to oppose the Corker-Kane authorization for military force, which require a two-thirds margin of two-thirds vote. And please urge opposition to any further military increases in the military budget, support peace conversion, and the Congressional Progressive Caucus People's Budget. I'm going to do a little quote from President Eisenhower. This is his famous speech about the military-industrial complex. Disarmament with mutual horror and confidence is a continuing imperative. Together we must learn how to compose differences, not with arms, but with intellect and decent purpose. Because this need is so sharp and apparent, I confess that I lay down my official responsibilities in this field with a definite sense of disappointment. As one who has witnessed the horror and lingering sadness of war, as one who knows another war could utterly destroy the civilization which has been slowly and painfully built over thousands of years, I wish I could say tonight that a lasting peace is in sight. And he also says that in the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. So he was very concerned about the power of the military-industrial complex. I agree with him. I fear that there's a danger that this military-industrial complex talked about by Eisenhower may lead us into a third world war. NATO games right near the Russian border and our military involvement in Syria are both extremely dangerous and should be opposed. In both cases, there is a danger of a U.S.-Russia confrontation. This point needs to be brought out in our messages to our congresspeople and senators as well. Our best hope for survival lies in international cooperation and mutual understanding across borders. This is the only way we can deal with the threats of nuclear weapons, global warming, scarcities of water and food, and public health issues that may arise in the future. It's only through international cooperation that we will survive. I will quote from Dr. Martin Luther King's famous Riverside speech, where he came out against the war in Vietnam and called for worldwide fellowship. This call for a worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concerns beyond one's own tribe, race, class, and nation is in reality a call for an all-embracing, unconditional love for all mankind. This oft misunderstood, this oft misinterpreted concept, so readily dismissed by the Nietzsches of the world as a weak and cowardly force, has now become an absolute necessity for the survival of man. Dr. King also talked about how the poor were used in the war in Vietnam in this famous Riverside speech, and I quote, "I speak for the poor in America who are paying the double price of smashed hopes at home and dealt death and corruption in Vietnam. I speak as a citizen of the world, for the world as it stands aghast at the path we have taken. I speak as one who loves America. To the leaders of our own nation, the great initiative in this war is ours. The initiative to stop it must be ours." Still today, the poor of the world are paying a double price for war. Too often, it is the poor who are the innocent victims of drone attacks and use of depleted uranium, which we used in Iraq. Schools, libraries, and mass transit lack proper funding as more and more money goes to weaponry and war. Thus, we all lose. We must be on guard against the distortions in our own mass media that seek to justify military solutions or undermine international cooperation. In the run-up to the Iraq War, we heard over and over again in the mass media about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But these weapons of mass destruction were never found. This war could have been prevented had we been given a more accurate and balanced picture. Massive demonstrations a few years ago in Pakistan against drone attacks on civilians also went unreported. Seymour Hersh, the reporter who exposed the My Lai massacre, reported on lab tests that contradicted the official media version of the 2013 chemical attacks in Syria, and that was ignored by our mass media. Until recently, the suffering of the people of Yemen was not given ample coverage. We hear over and over again about Russian interference in our 2016 election, yet the evidence for many of these allegations, such as the alleged hacking of the 2016 DNC emails, is still lacking. This demonization of nations and leaders in our media and public discourse, I believe, is poisoning the atmosphere we need to foster for international cooperation needed to reduce the threat of nuclear weapons and prevent war. Let me just show you the graphs here. This is a pie chart of the federal discretionary budget. 54% of the federal budget is going to either military or debt for past military spending. 54%. That leaves 6% for education, 6% for Medicare and health, 6% for housing, and 4% for 3% for the environment, 4% for international affairs, and for veterans, 6%. Okay? So they just approved another increase in the military budget. We could create more jobs by investing in healthcare and education and renewable energy than we can by investing in these horrible weapons. This is another chart. This is another chart, and it basically says U.S. military expenditures are roughly the size of the next 7 largest military budgets around the world. Again, U.S. military expenditures are roughly the size of the next 7 military budgets around the world combined. In other words, if you combine the next 7 largest military budgets compared, the U.S. military budget is basically equal or larger than the next 7 military budgets combined. That includes Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, United Kingdom, India, France, Japan. You put them all together, it would be maybe equal to the military budget of the United States. This is a flyer we put out at the time of the Syria bombing, asking people to call the White House, call Congress. And it says, attacking Syria does not save the lives of children. Bombing kills. Bombing makes more enemies. Bombing emboldens the terrorists who are already spreading violence in Europe and the U.S. So it says, stop bombing, hands off Syria. So I urge you to call Congress, make your voice heard, and I do thank you for your time in hearing out Voices for Peace in this edition of Peace is Possible program. Thank you.